Today we're going to be taking a look at a Casablanca Victorian in antique copper. Antique copper is quite possibly the oldest Casablanca finish and also one of the least common Casablanca finishes. This is finish number 1, which is what leads me to believe that it is Casablanca's oldest finish, but don't quote me on that because I'm not a huge expert on very early Casablanca stuff. But it was a part of Casablanca's original line of finishes, and it was discontinued around 1983 along with other low-selling finishes like polished copper and pewter. But then it was brought back in the late 90s under the number 51, and that's why you see Victorian 2s and later New Orleans in antique copper, as it was brought back somewhere around the Hunter buyout and then discontinued again in the early to mid-2000s. This one, though, of course, is part of the original run of antique copper, as this is a K63 Victorian from March of 1979. It has a K4L, walnut cane blades, and a somewhat long downrod, but not long enough to the point where it hangs too low, though it does still hang lower than I would like it to. But what are you gonna do? And the top plate does have the triangle vents, which is pretty common for K63 Victorians. And it has an open switch cap, meaning the parts right here in between the little ornate arches are open, and you can look right into the switch housing, though it's too dark to really see anything. And one more thing of note over on this side is you can see there's a hole drilled right there. That is because whoever originally owned this fan must have really not liked the idea of having a three-way pull chain controlling both the fan and the light, so they drilled a hole into the side and put in a separate pull chain for the light. Obviously, once I got this fan, I immediately took that out and plan on putting a plug in that hole eventually, but issue is at the current time I don't have one to do that with, but once I get one I will do it. This fan is in okay condition overall. The finish looks rather nice. The bearings are pretty good. One other thing is some of the brackets are a bit out of clock. However, they're not horribly out of clock, I want to say. One other thing is that the shaft going into the motor is not in there very tight. It is somewhat loose, which means that it does sometimes rattle around when the fan is traveling at faster speeds. And that is the reason I do not have light shades on this fan, is because when I do, the weight of it causes it to rattle around much worse. The less weight that's on there, the less it rattles around. And this fan did originally have a K5L, however I took the centerpiece off because the wiring is pretty frayed on the fixture. I do plan on redoing the wiring on the socket and then putting it back onto this fan, but I just haven't gotten around to doing that quite yet. It's been a busy last couple of months. Anyways, with all that out of the way, we'll go ahead and ignite power. Start off showing the light. Though later on, to be honest, because of the loose shaft issue, I might just take off the light kit entirely to completely reduce the chance of it rattling. Now we'll start the fan up as slow as it can go. Yes, that's as slow as it can go. Just wanted to double check. Well, it could go slower if I adjusted the trim pot, but I think it's already pretty good. I did adjust the trim pot on this fan once before, as when I first got this fan, the minimum speed was honestly pretty fast. It was slightly faster than what a low speed on a Slumber 3 Casablanca would be, which I believe is how most of these trim pots were set from the factory, which was way too fast for me, so I did set it down a ways. I got the ceiling fan out of a house in Long Island, New York, along with a white and brass K63 Victorian. A video on that fan to come later. And of course the 60 cycle hum is ever present. So of the original 9 finishes, antique copper seems to be the second least common, with pewter being the most rare, but this one being not too far behind it. This finish was offered on quite a few fans though. It was offered on the Victorian, as you see here, the Zephyr, the Four Seasons, the New Orleans, and the 20th Century. And there may be a few others that I'm forgetting as well. And in terms of the model you see this finish on the most, that's probably the Victorian, as quite a handful of K55 and K63 antique copper Victorians at this point in time have been unearthed. The house that this and the other Victorian came out of, these were not the only 2 fans in there. There were also 2 Hampton Bay Claremonts, I think they're called. The ornate Hampton Bay fans that, if you squint really, really, really hard, you might mistake for Victorians. So it does make me wonder if these two fans were installed decades before and then those two came later, or if those two Hampton Bays replaced other really cool K63 Casablancas. And apologies, the camera is really refusing to focus there. We're at about a medium-high-ish speed now. The fan wobbles the most around the lowish medium speeds. It still wobbles here, but not as much as it did. It was more of a sway, really, but you probably get what I mean. And that's almost full speed. And there we go, full tilt. And as you can probably tell, this is one of the very large and very powerful K63 motors. Emerson supplied Casablanca with some pretty inconsistent sized motors, but this was certainly one of the larger ones. That thing is moving very fast. And this thing is cranking out air like a boss. And you can see the switch housing is shaking and bumping about a little bit. But again, thankfully it's not rattling too horribly. And there you go. A Casablanca Victorian in antique copper with a K63 motor.